What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, the official podcast of MetalNexus.net, where you can get all your show reviews, concert reviews, and so much more. And with me, as always, is Daniel Terry. How are you doing this late evening?
Oh, I just got home from work, so I'm really excited to be sitting down in an air-conditioned place. I'm sure I've got, grease all over my face, but whatever, I didn't have to exit the car for the entire hour and a half drive home, so I'm locked and loaded and ready to go.
Yeah, I saw Spider-Man today, the new Spider-Man. Today came out technically.
How was that?
It was good. It definitely sets up the next phase of the MCU, which I'm pretty excited about. Because, without getting into spoilers or anything like that, it's one of those things. This is the first movie outside of Endgame that we have now. And it's kind of interesting that it is in the MCU, but it's technically a Sony property. So it's weird that the first new phase of the MCU is starting with a Sony film.
Well, I guess they could just see how it goes and then decide whether or not they want to add it into the overall canon, right?
Well, this one definitely is heavy-handed after the fact of the events of Endgame.
I see. So it's very blatant.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the events of Endgame definitely loom large on the events of the new Spider-Man movie. It was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought Jake Gyllenhaal was a perfect Mysterio, and the way that they were able to make him the character that you've been reading about for decades plus was really interesting. And I think that's actually a really good segue to our guest. Speaking of a decades-long, career and getting to know somebody, is Reb Beach. You might know him from the band, this little band called Winger, or
Who's that?
More currently, yeah, Winger sucks.
What was that Korn song? Your favorite band is Winger, and all you eat is zingers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot about that. All in the Family.
Yeah.
And for the last, I think 17 years now, he has been, I think since 2002, he's been in another little known band called Whitesnake.
Oh, yeah. Another up-and-coming bunch of young pups.
Yeah, it's we haven't dipped too much into classic rock, but this is one of those where when the new Whitesnake record was coming out, John Freeman, who we deal with quite a bit, getting some of these guests, I saw on his Facebook thing that he was representing Whitesnake, and I was like, I'm going to see if I can get David Coverdale. Dude's pretty funny. If you've ever heard him on the Eddie Trunk podcast, he usually has great stories to tell of decades past, and just a very chatty guy. And was told that basically he is too busy, as it were. And that Reb Beach was available, and I was like, I know a lot about Reb Beach, and I would gladly love to talk to him. But no, Reb Beach was really fun. We got him pretty much just as he was waking up. I called him when I was supposed to, and then he was just like, oh, I thought you were supposed to call me like a half hour from now. So a little bit of a delay kind of getting going into the conversation, but I thought this was a lot of fun. Like I said, we don't have a whole lot of what is deemed classic rock or classic hair metal or so forth on the show, but it's definitely not because it's not an area of music that we're not versed in. It's just typically people assume that we're just metal and hardcore guys.
Yeah, we all had to start somewhere. I wouldn't be into the music I'm into now if it wasn't for some of those building block type of bands. And
White Lion was huge for you in that Christian metal scene, right? Maybe Nelson? Bride?
No, Bride.
Striper?
No, Striper's cool. Actually, to bump off of something I was talking to somebody on another podcast about recently, Striper's actually getting better as they go, which is interesting. But yeah, the Yellow and Black Attack, they were back. I don't know where they were back from, but they were back. And we had stuff like Striper and Bride, and I remember this one band called X Center that sounded exactly like AC/DC. They were cool. It's so funny too because whenever we start talking about classic rock, and actually that should be one of our Patreon episodes is what our favorite classic rock or 80s metal bands are. I'd say we do classic rock and an 80s metal as a separate thing. But yeah, that might be something cool to do sometime. But yeah, admittedly, a lot of the bands I listened to in that era were Christian bands, Christian metal bands. I still have most of them on cassette behind me, and I have no regrets.
Not one?
There's a few regrets. All my Bride albums.
What about Yeah. No, it was, this is the era of music that I grew up on. Like, I've made a lot of comments about, my parents just sticking me in front of MTV, it was just always on. And being exposed to a lot of different types of music and so forth. And, back in the days of CD clubs, if anyone remembers those, Columbia House and BMG and all that kind of stuff. I remember my dad getting a lot of these things, Great White, Tesla, Aerosmith, Get a Grip. I remember that record just played all the time. Every Saturday morning, I just heard that like kick drum and the bird noise that starts off Get a Grip. And that was how I woke up every Saturday morning for like 6 months. Winger was a huge one. I mean, it's funny, like, everyone obviously knows 17, but I think, honestly, one of my favorite songs of theirs is Headed for a Heartbreak. Like, there's something about that song that kind of really gets me. But I've always been attracted to Reb's playing. I mean, the whole band, Winger as a whole, is criminally underrated. Everybody in that band is just a monster. I got to see them probably about 15 years ago now, and I was probably the youngest person by a good 20, 25 years, and I bought it. This is back when I still was really skinny. I bought a woman's Winger t-shirt because it was the only one that was pretty cool and had like the old Winger logo on it.
That's awesome. What's funny about Winger, too, is I think he's dead on, too, that, like, part of the reason they weren't as maybe successful as some of their contemporaries was that the style of music that they were into, like almost that they came a little too late to the party, And, a lot of the stuff that they were doing was on its way out while they were doing it. But it's so funny because you go back and look at a band like Winger, and I consider them kind of a hidden gem as far as bands like that go. I mean, like they're huge, but I feel like they're almost easier to appreciate now maybe than then, because now we're not tied down by the what's cool, what's not cool.
Well, I think that's kind of the interesting thing about that era of music is, I've always not unapologetically just really been into it. And the thing that I've always said about it, and I even said it in the interview, and I don't really necessarily know that Reb kind of took it a completely different route than I was going to go with it and meant by it, but just that, the virtuosic playing that encompassed that era of music was just stupid. Like, everyone was the best guitar player. And everyone was raising the bar of what they could do vocally, all the solos and all this other stuff, bass players and everything, every band member had to be the best of the best. And the thing that kind of sucks is, like, everyone just remembers when it was kind of at its most over the top. No one remembers all the beginning parts of it that really kind of defined that era of music and what really brought it out and made it mainstream. And it's kind of sad to see, like, everyone kind of focus more on the tropes that kind of led to its downfall, as opposed to the tropes that made it successful and made it as timeless as it has become. And it was kind of interesting, though, that Reb kind of took it a different route and was just like, yeah, you just don't see a whole lot of, like, where are the Van Halens? Where are the where are these people at now? Like, you just don't see these kind of players anymore. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess not.
Well, and I'm going to disagree with him a little bit and agree at the same time. I think he's dead on as far as, like, mainstream music goes. I feel like mainstream music is definitely moving away from guitar and guitar shredding for sure. I think those massive, really influential guitar players that he's talking about might just not be playing music that can be absorbed by the masses. There's obviously technical death metal guitarists that are leaps and bounds more innovative now for and I don't want to say more innovative because I can't take somebody that's playing in like a modern technical band and pit them up against somebody that was massive in the 80s. I mean, it's just totally a different playing field now. But I think a lot of those guitarists are out there, but they're never gonna be all over the charts, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, to better finish that thought, though, I agree with him, though, as far as there hasn't been the Eddie Van Halen of this generation, that's just going to take it all by storm, and I think part of that, though, is more to do just with a societal change towards music. In the 80s, it was very guitar focused. In the 90s, metal kind of almost became more about the drums. And, and then, you have bands like Meshuggah that the guitarists became drums. So it's definitely, I totally understand his point. I just don't necessarily think that, guitar shredders are as appreciated now as they once were. So that could be what is preventing somebody that maybe is really good from coming out of the woodwork, or maybe they are out of the woodwork, but they never reach the level of success to be heard on that level.
Well, speaking of getting on the level to be heard, let's get into my conversation with Reb Beach, and we will talk to you all afterwards. So I have the pleasure of talking to Reb Beach, guitarist for Whitesnake and Winger as well. They have their newest album, Flesh and Blood, coming out May 10th via Frontiers Music. How are you doing this early afternoon?
I'm doing good. I just woke up, 2 o'clock, after 8-hour bus ride.
Yeah, it looked like you guys were in
Ohio.
You're in Ohio, yeah.
Heights. Good outdoor show. Went well. It was fun. It was because you can see the audience, which I love. It was a daytime kind of thing. Early show.
Do you actually like playing the earlier shows? I know it's an un-rock and roll hour sometimes to play some of these matinee shows, but I feel like you actually probably get more crowd actually at some of these because of the demographic that you guys cater to.
I do. I like a 8 o'clock show is perfect. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock is great. I don't like when the sun's in my eyes and when it's like 90 million degrees. But and also I don't like playing when it's really cold because my guitars are really susceptible to cold, because of the whammy bar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about this new record. It comes out, like I said, on May 10th, so we're about 2 weeks away, roughly, at this point, as of when we're recording. I gotta say, I really have enjoyed this record. It's one of those where I feel like this is a band who's just having fun creating new music. Like, at the legacy of where Whitesnake is, you don't have to make new music, and I think it's been said quite a bit on like Eddie Trunk's podcast and so forth. But the fact that you guys still are and having such a fun time, and it really comes through in the music, I think it's really inspiring to see a band that's celebrating 40 plus years and just having fun.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with David's lyrics, which are really up tempo, and he always writes about love and girls. And
timeless things.
Fun time, timeless things. Yeah. It's just good time 80s rock, and that's what people love. And it's kind of having a resurgence right now, if you ask me. I mean, doing shows with Winger, we're just selling out, so people are wanting to see it.
I kind of was going to touch on that a little bit ago, but it seems like the perfect opportunity to kind of talk about that now. Myself kind of growing up in the 80s as a young kid and being inundated with the 80s rock scene and so forth, being a product of MTV and so forth, it was one of those that, like, I grew up, my parents loving that kind of music, Whitesnake and Winger and all these kind of bands, and, it was just good music to me. And then it seemed to be this thing, maybe I guess in the mid-90s, I guess with like grunge or whatever, where it was unpopular to like such things. Is it weird to kind of go through this roller coaster of a time period where it's like, we're cool, now we're not, now we're cool again?
Well, they say that a lot of that stuff is circular, whatever, that it comes back just like fashion, and it certainly does seem like the 80s rock is making a resurgence, just by all the bands that I'm seeing are doing well right now. We have a booking agent that books us and Warrant and Lita Ford and Firehouse and a bunch of other acts, 80s acts, and they're just doing really well right now. And I think that the people are just wanting that good time music again, and not so much the depressing, grungy stuff, And, you know, I've been waiting for the next Van Halen to come out myself. I can't wait for like a young band to come out with a killer guitar player and an awesome front man.
Oh, so it's not Greta Von
great...
Fleet like everyone's saying?
Greta Von Fleet is well, you know, I'm talking about Van Halen kind of thing. With, yeah, killer drummer, killer guitar player. Greta Van Fleet is more, you know, like Zeppelin-y, bluesy kind of thing.
Well, I think for a while everyone kind of, or no, I guess that was more, they were comparing them to AC/DC. I was going to say Airborne was kind of that band that everyone, it seems like every so often there's that band that's going to come around and save rock and roll, you know, for, I think in the early 2000s it was The Darkness was going to bring it back, you know, with the kind of high vocals and the twin guitar leads and so forth, and, you know, then they kind of went away. Then it was, like I said, Airborne I think was another one that was going to kind of bring back, you know, rock and roll. I feel like now you have bands like Rival Sons and The Struts that are kind of in that kind of players kind of mentality, or like a band's band kind of in space. But yeah, I don't really think I can't really put my finger on it. I don't think there really is a Van Halen kind of thing, which I kind of think, you know, and I've always said, kind of speaking back to the era that, you know, you came up in, is we were so inundated with just phenomenal players who were pushing the boundaries of what you could do within the rock world, whether it be from the playing perspective or whatever. And I feel like that definitely got lost. Like, I mean, there are great talents and great players over the course of time since then, but it just, you know, you look at that time period of the 80s, it's like, you know, there was Doug Aldrich, there was, you know, there's so many players, and it just kept pushing, I think, all of you to be more competitive with one another, to up one another and just put out the best that you could. And I feel like that's kind of lacking at times.
You mean the Guitar Hero thing?
Yeah.
You don't really see any new guitar heroes coming out, you know? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because all these guys that are coming out of GIT and Berkeley, you know, that can just play anything, can't write songs, you know? So you never hear of them.
Right. What, you know, kind of speaking of someone that I think really shines on this new record, Joel, this is the first record he's gotten to play on, and I mean, it seems like a good guitar pairing between you and him on this record. You know, a lot of really good riffs, good solos, good like lead lines and so forth. How was it working with Joel on this new record?
It was great. He's sort of the opposite of me, so it worked out really well that way. You know, he's one of those schooled guys that can play anything, and you know, he's great at slide. He's great at acoustic. You know, he can finger pick. So it was great to have him on board, and he had lots of ideas. I just let him do whatever he wanted, and he came up with some great stuff. It's pretty neat to watch him solo. He's one of those one-take guys, you know, and it's like he did one thing that I just couldn't believe. He did a solo and did it perfect, like just one take, perfect take. And I said, that's it, you're done. That's a perfect solo. He said, well, let me double it. And he doubled it. And then, you know, I figured that he must have just taught it to himself the night before. Well, no, he said, let me try another one. And he did another completely different, perfect solo. And he said, all right, now let me double that. And he doubled it. And that was all in 4 takes, you know, 4 perfect takes. So that's how he rolls, you know. And I just, I work a little differently. Like I screw around with it for a half an hour and, you know, figure out melodies until I can come up with something that is cool. But, you know, we have very different styles. So that's always great. You know, we don't sound like each other.
No, most definitely. I think that kind of shines through in this. And it seems like you always kind of, in your time in Whitesnake, you've always kind of gotten really good complementary players to what you do. I've always felt anyway.
Yeah. Like with Doug Aldrich, I was kind of the Steve Vai guy. And yeah, he was the Sykes guy.
Something that kind of stood out to me, and something we've kind of touched on quite a bit on this podcast as of late, is you know, talking about EPs and full lengths and all that kind of stuff, and just where the demand for music is now, new music and so forth. And you know, what something kind of stood out to me is on this record, it's 13 tracks in total, but when you listen to it, it doesn't feel like anything shouldn't be there. Like, so I kind of wanted to know, you know, was how many songs had been written for this album, and how long did it take to kind of craft this record, and how much attention was paid to the track listing itself, because I think it flows really well.
David spent a lot of time listening to the songs and figuring out which ones he wanted to be where. That was all him. I mean, he would send stuff to us, and we'd tell him what we thought. I told him I wanted a song, Can't Do Right for Doing Wrong, a blues tune that's on the bonus tracks of like the deluxe edition. I thought that should be not only available on the bonus ones, I thought it should be on the proper record. And I wanted to flip it with Always and Forever, and he said, no way. So, I made a couple of suggestions and got shot down in flames. And it came out the way he wanted it, so it's perfect.
As I say, I think it's just kind of an attestament to how great each song is individually, because a song like Well I Never, to me, like, I could see that being in the first 3 or 4 songs and kind of front loading, and that was kind of something, like I said, that just kept standing out to me about this record and the experience of listening to it. Is there's not a bad song where you're like, oh, there's okay, it was front loaded, or okay, track 6 and now we're starting to like kind of die down. It's like, no, it works and flows really well. And to me, it then creates this problem for you where you're like, all right, well, this whole CD is really good, so how the fuck do you start integrating these songs into the classics now and getting all the standards in?
Yeah, it's a little bit shocking to me that we're doing these new songs live.
Yeah, I think I saw you're playing 5.
We're playing 5, but you wouldn't know it. They're interspersed into the hits, and people are singing all the words, and the album's not even out yet. I mean, the singles are out, but I mean, the songs are so easy. You hear the chorus once and you know the chorus. It's just, hey, you, and shut up and kiss me. Just screaming stuff out, which is easy to do in the arena. Just scream this out, and when when the chorus comes, just scream, hey, you. And it's very simple, and people are really latching on to it. So, I thought everyone was going to get up and go get a beer when we started doing the new stuff, and really nobody has. And there haven't been that many complaints, and I'm really encouraged by it. I've never seen anything like it, to tell you the truth. You were saying, Well I Never was the first song that David had when I came in to write. The first thing he played me was Well I Never. And I listened to it, and at first, because he plays his stuff on acoustic and just sings it. And at first, it just sounded like maybe a little bit silly somehow, but then, 10 minutes after that, I can't get the song out of my head. And then for a month after that, I couldn't get the song out of my head. And to the point where I was saying, David, we have to do this song. This song has to be on the record. That hook is undeniable. So, and that's how he comes up with stuff. That's a typical David Coverdale piece of songwriting there. It just that just popped into his head.
It's funny you touched on the fact that the choruses or kind of the bridges even are very simple and anthemic. And I mean, even like I know that you are playing this in the set, Trouble Is Your Middle Name. I mean, I was kind of surprised when they got to that point in the record, because it's almost dead center in the middle of the record, which is redundant. But I was like, that almost could have been the album opener. Like, there's a couple of songs on here that I feel like that are tucked back at the back half of the record where I'm like, man, these could have been album openers. Like, it's you don't see that very often on records anymore, where you can kind of envision like, okay, this could start the record, this could start a set, or this could be here, or whatever. And it's like, it seems like that's kind of a good problem to have, where you have such good quality material that it can go anywhere in a set and kind of pick everything back up if you want to take things down a notch for one of the ballads or whatever.
That's really good to hear. I'm glad that you like the record and you like a lot of the songs. Very, very cool. I know what you mean about some albums having dogs and lulls in the middle, and or usually most of the time the best stuff is in the front, and then just it gets worse and worse as the album goes on.
Yeah.
but not here for sure. And I'm glad that you recognize that, and thank you for listening to the whole record.
Well, I mean, that's half of the point of asking for a promo copy, so I can actually talk about it in some not general vagueness of being like, so the singles are cool. How does the rest of the record sound?
Hey, you'd be surprised.
I kind of wanted to know, I mean, you're already playing 5 songs off of this record, so I mean, you're about, sort of at the halfway point of playing this whole record live. Do you envision, with it being such a strong record from start to finish, that you will swap some of those other songs out for some of the other material, or do you think the 5 that are in the set now are going to kind of be the ones that are the mainstays from this album cycle?
Well, there's one song I really want to do, and so, we'll see if I can get David to do it. It's a song that's dear to my heart because I spent months writing it. It's the last song on the record, Sands of Time. It's kind of my big epic ballad song that, I wanted to be like Forevermore, which was an awesome song that Doug Aldrich wrote, which was the title track for the last record. And we've been doing it at rehearsal, just screwing around, and it sounds really cool. So I'm hoping David will do that one maybe in Europe. That's my favorite one on the record. And if so, we could switch it out. But right now we do the drum solo in Get Up. And, I miss playing Crying in the Rain myself. I want to play that song too. So we'll see.
You kind of touched on one of the questions I had for you, which is, at this point you've been in the band for 17 years and have put out, this will be the 4th record, as you just said. You kind of touched on a song you would like to play from the new record. Is there something from any of the other 3, or even, hell, in any of the back catalog that you haven't gotten to play that you really want to get your hands on and get out there and play?
Nope. I've played most every song that I wanted to play. I don't really know. I'm sad to say I don't really know that old stuff as well as I should. The old bluesy stuff. The only songs I know are the ones that we've played. Like Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City. And I should go back and listen to all of that stuff one of these days. But that it doesn't go into my thoughts when I'm thinking about what songs I want to play. The answer to that is I'd love to do Crying in the Rain again, even though we did it all last year. I really miss doing it because I love playing the solo in that song.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit and talking about gear itself. I saw a rig rundown on YouTube recently that you had done and was kind of pleasantly surprised with as much touring as the band does and as much overseas touring as you guys do, that you haven't switched to like an amp profiler at this point to kind of make things a little easier, especially given the diverse nature of some of the tones that you have to pull off from, a 40-year career of the band's discography and so forth. So has that something that you've ever played around with, or are you just, really love kind of dialing tones and having just, the things there on stage with you, and that if something goes wrong, you know how to like fix it right away? It's not all based on a sort of a computer.
No, I'm old school, man. I plug into an amp with tubes, and I plug directly into it, and I get a sound with EMGs, and that's my sound. It sounds exactly the same all the time. It's big and fat, and it's, and Joel, he uses all that crap and sounds great, but for me, I have to use a head. I've always used a head. I'll always use a head until they perfect it. They just haven't perfected it for me. I can tell, if there's something lacking, some kind of balls that I can tell right away if I'm playing through a Kemper or a Fractal. And yeah, it's really great, the diversity of having something like that, but I need my big fat amp sound.
Fair enough. That was just something, in today's world, it seems so many players, even some of the players that have been around as long as you have, that are starting to see the simplicity in having it, especially in a touring sense, where there's kind of less to go wrong, like things to break or whatever. However, I guess the flip side of that is when that thing goes down, you don't have a way to back that up unless you just have a backup Kemper or whatever. So
Yeah, no, it's a pain in the butt what I do, because you have to bring two big heads out, and, tubes go bad and all kinds of stuff. You blow fuses and, it's pain for sure, but that's the way I've just always done it. That's the way, Joe Satriani and Steve Vai and Van Halen and, everyone uses heads. Just because it's fatter, but in the studio, those things are great for you needing a different tone. Like you need like a clean sound with a strat, and a flanger, like, well, ta-da, here it is, just dial it in. And those things are great. I'm not knocking them.
So kind of in wrapping up, since I know you got to get back to your day here, a couple of things. It's been a couple of years since the last Winger record came out. Obviously, you were talking about how you had been playing some shows and how well they've been doing. Is there anything new on the Winger front coming up maybe in the next year or so?
Yeah, August, I go to Kip's house. I'm going to hang out with Kip, and we're going to, hit the 10 a.m. in the studio until 7 p.m. every day and write an album. The last time we wrote it in 2 weeks. And the time before that, we did it in 10 days. We wrote 10 on Karma. We wrote 10 songs in 10 days, and we wrote it like front to back. So on the first day, we wrote what we knew was going to be the first song on the record, and then we said, okay, what do we want to be the second song on the record? And just kind of already knew what the lineup was going to be,
Something that kind of surprised me a little bit was, your last record did really well album sales-wise, I believe debuting in the top 200. With that being the case, were you kind of surprised at how well it did, considering maybe not a lot of the older fans maybe are adaptive to, Apple Music or Spotify or any of these things?
No, because I'm out there playing to these people, and I see the fans that we have. And that's just in America. We haven't been to Europe in forever. And I know we've got a lot of fans in Europe. I know we sold a lot of records in Europe. So we'd love to go over there. It's just the offers are kind of small. We'd have to kind of, can I swear on a blog?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd have to kind of eat shit, in crappy hotels and, vans for 7 hours and stuff like that. But I really want to go over to Europe with Winger. So next year, we'll have a new album, and we'll be able to do some shows with some new music.
Is there, have you been, you're so inundated with Whitesnake stuff, and obviously now a new Winger record that you're going to be working on. Is there plans to do anything to follow up Masquerade at all? Like, do you have any ideas for another solo record?
I have it written.
Oh, wow. Okay.
it's not, written. It's just like, when Dee Snider brought Love Is for Suckers to me, he had verses and choruses and maybe a bridge. But he had the meat of the songs were done, and he just needed solo sections or like an occasional bridge section. And so we went in there and wrote it, and that's where I am with the Masquerade thing. I've got, I don't know, 12 or 13 songs, and they're just all, choruses and verses and ready to go. And they just need to dot the I's and cross the T's, and that's done, and get the lyricist on it, because I can't write lyrics. I'm terrible with that. But I'm really, really excited about that. And I do have a solo album coming out. It's an instrumental record. And I'm very, very proud of it. And it looks like it's going to be on Frontiers. And it's going to be their first instrumental record, if it works out, and that would be out in the fall. And the tentative title is A View from the Inside, and it's kind of like a Jeff Beck kind of sounding thing, I guess, but it rocks a little more. So, but it's very inside. It's not jazz or anything. It's, all my stuff is catchy and good hooks. It's all about the hooks.
So the Dirt movie has come out now. The Dirt book has been out for a long time. You're seeing a lot of these band people start putting out. I don't know if memoirs is quite the right term to use anymore, but because it seems like some of these things kind of get embellished a little bit for the sake of a book to push a book and book sales and so forth. But with that being said, have you ever thought about writing a book at all, a kind of documenting or a look back at everything that you've accomplished and gone through in your musical career?
People tell me I should do it, but I don't think I'm famous enough. And the best stories I would tell would be about my family and growing up. I have some great stories about that kind of trump the rock and roll stories, because all that stuff's been told before, you know. and also, you know, Winger, we were nothing like Motley Crue. It's one of the reasons why we didn't do even better than we could. It's one of the reasons we weren't really a headline band. Was that we were, you know, all studio musicians, and all of us were really good looking, and we never got into any trouble. And you know, we wore spandex and had the big hair at the end of the 80s when it was kind of going away, you know. So we just came in on the tail end of all that.
Actually, here's my last question, and something I've kind of been thinking about leading up to this, and listening back to Winger and thinking about when I actually saw you guys here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I think it's been over a decade now at this point. But I know, obviously, when you guys play 17, spoiler alert, you change the lyric typically to whatever the age would be for the person, the fictitious person at this point in time. Or at least at the time, I think it was she's only 43 or something like that, I think was what the lyric was changed to.
47. You mean when we played live, you mean?
Yeah. Yep. So it's one of those things where, do you think a song like 17 could come out in today's world?
Huh. You mean and be big?
Yeah, or I guess more to the point, not have like the PC police just come and slam on it.
Huh. Well, I mean, we never got any crap for that song. Not that I knew of. And yeah, I guess times have changed recently with, you know, the Me Too movement and all that. I know, talk to the Beatles, you know, she was just 17, you know what I mean? You know, there's Christine 16 by Kiss.
Yep.
So I guess
Ted Nugent has quite a bunch of songs that are a little sketchy in that too.
You will be my bridge over troubled daughters. He played me that song. He's like, it was so awesome. Yeah, when I met Ted Nugent, I met him a few times. One time he picked up my guitar and said, "Hey man, I wrote this song. It's called You Will Be My Bridge Over Troubled Daughters." And then he started playing it, and the guitar. He took the guitar out of tune in seconds because his hand rolled over the fine tuners on my whammy bar.
Oh yeah.
And he said, these Floyd Roses, I can't play them because that's where my hand sits. I thought that was interesting. But do I think people could get away with it? Maybe, because it's rock and roll. Because it's rock and roll, man.
I guess it was just one of the as I was thinking about it, it's like, oh man, I don't know if you could put out, like, if this was a song brand new today, man, I don't know.
Daddy says she's too young, but she's old enough for me.
Yep.
I don't know. Sometimes Kip has trouble singing that, you know. he feels like an old pervert or something, you know.
Kind of a last question. What does 2019 hold for the rest of you for either Whitesnake, Winger, or whatever? I mean, I know we kind of touched on it, but it looks like your tour, you're going to be playing, looks like tomorrow in Richmond, Virginia, and the tour rolls through till July 7th over in Germany, and then after that, kind of looks like everything's kind of up in the air for you so far.
Yeah, we're, you know, probably do South America, probably do Japan. You know, we haven't heard anything yet, but, you know, it's kind of a standby thing, and that's usually what happens. And we find out pretty soon around this time of year what he wants to do in the fall. And then, you know, I'm going to try and write with Kip or record with Kip in the interim, in any time that we're not on the road. And then next year, I'll be, juggling both bands as I always do. And I'm just lucky to have 2 gigs. Very, very lucky. And both of which I love, by the way.
Yeah, it definitely shows. Granted, this for whatever it's worth, since haven't really made your way over to Michigan with either band in a little bit, but it looks like from the YouTube video I saw of the full set that you guys have been playing lately, it looks like everyone's having a blast, and it looks like the fans are having a really great time as well. So hopefully you'll make it around this way soonish, so I can try to catch a show and see these new tunes, because it looks phenomenal. It looks like you and everyone are just, like I said, having a good time playing.
Yeah, it really is. It's going great. Everyone's having a good time, and we're definitely having a good time up there. And David says to us right before we go on stage every night, have fun out there, darling.
Well, wanted to say thank you for taking the time again, and again, the new record, Flesh and Blood, comes out May 10th via Frontiers Music, and go pick it up. It's a great record, and thanks again, Reb, for taking the time.
My pleasure. Good talking to you.
So that was my conversation with Reb Beach of Winger and Whitesnake. I had a lot of fun with that one. I especially like the fact of, just kind of where the conversation went at the end, where I was like, do you think if the band were to come out now that 17 could still be a viable, song? Do you think you would catch shit for it, or are you surprised that you haven't caught shit for it currently?
He seemed kind of, at first wasn't sure, what a good way to answer that question was. And I totally get it, because especially in that case, you have to be really careful how you say it. Because if you say, I don't care what anybody thinks, you're going to attract exactly that same type of attention that we're, asking about. But yeah, no, I definitely liked his little quip of he's like, Kip really doesn't like singing that song, or has a little bit of trouble singing that song now, because he's so much older now, and it just comes off as creepy, whereas when they were all young bucks in the 80s, it wasn't,
Right. Yeah, like I said, when I saw him all those years ago, they changed the lyric, I think at the time, to she's only 47 or 37 or something like that. So I mean,
yeah, that's really funny. Yeah,
they've updated it, and I thought it was kind of cool too. Getting to talk about this. We didn't talk about the Whitesnake record much in the intro, but their new record, Flesh and Blood, is out now. You can pick it up anywhere. You can probably go and buy the vinyl, catch the guys on tour and so forth. But I was pleasantly surprised. A lot of times, like I've said, and if you listen to Eddie Trunk, you hear him say this with almost everybody that he has on the show that is not a current new band or newer, but that basically you get to this point in a career, whether you're Winger, whether you're Whitesnake, whether you're, we'll say Sebastian Bach or Skid Row, where you just kind of get to a point and it's almost like, why put anything out? No one cares. Everyone just wants to hear the hits that they know, and that's it. And they'll be completely satisfied with everything that you do that is those things. So the fact that they're able to still put out a current sounding record, and the fact that it seems like, these songs are well lived in and that they are having fun playing them, and it comes across on the recorded material, then it's well, then fuck it. Why not? When the output is this good, why not do it? And I guess this is the example of that. But I don't think that a lot of bands of this era have that same passion or fire, maybe. Judas Priest is really, and Iron Maiden, I guess, are one of the last two that I can think of that are, this far into their career. I guess Megadeth, too, with Dystopia, where it's you're 3 decades into a career and you're still putting out records that a lot of people are yo, this new album is really fucking good.
Yeah, and I think what that is that, if you're a fan of the band and you love the hits, whenever the band's current output is just as, I don't want to say relevant necessarily, because some of it very much is a throwback sound, but I guess these guys are just at an age where they're done experimenting. They've gone in every direction that they want to do, and there is still plenty of room for that. I mean, Reb's got a new album coming out that's an instrumental album, so whatever experimentation he has, if you just love hearing dude play, you can still get that experimental stuff if that's what you're looking for. But if you're just a classic fan, you're gonna want that throwback sound. But the biggest difference is that these are new songs, and that doesn't sound very profound on its own, but these are new songs, but they sound massive in a way that even the old recordings didn't sound.
Well, I think the thing really, it's a good point, and I don't know how familiar you are with Whitesnake's re-recorded material of the classic material, but they've have since redone, like re-recorded all the original, like the 1987 self-titled album, and you can hear the differences. Like if you know how like the keys go and like the guitar tones and just some of the things that are going on that song or on the whole album, you can just hear it right away. Like I can tell when Here I Go Again is playing or Is This Love, I can tell which version I'm hearing within 2 seconds, because I can tell that it doesn't have that same vibe because they've tried to bring it into the new era. And sometimes, like, this is something as staunch collectors of music and audiophiles and such as Dan and I are, where this is where it's like, it would be cool if this had modern production, to make it sound current and relevant, and didn't have all the nostalgia attached to it. However, there's something to be said about a record just sounding like the time that it was recorded in and why it came out at that point, because that's what made you fall in love with it, is how it sounded when you first heard it. And so to go back and alter that is it's almost blasphemous at times, but I feel like Reb, interestingly enough, across everything he's done, has stayed tired and true to his sound. And it's been kind of interesting, like sneaking in just a little bit of gear talk where I was like, oh, so like, do you use Kempers because of having 40 years worth of recorded material or so, and you needing to recreate tones maybe of heads that you don't even own anymore? And he's like, nope, still use the same gear that I've been using, still plug in, still have all this stuff. And I was like,
still using the same 8 knobs. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, that's pretty commendable. But, you don't see that a whole lot anymore either. So it seems like Reb is one of those players that is just old school through and through in approach and execution.
Yeah, and I think that's respectable. And going back to your point about, the re-recordings and stuff, I'm not very familiar with the Whitesnake stuff that's re-recorded. But I will tell you that it's really hard to please people like us, because we want, really want to hear this with modern production. But what you really want is like just a more, you want the exact same recording, like basically remastered, which, don't get me wrong, we get plenty of that. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, we don't really necessarily want the re-record. We say we want the re-record, or we want the quote-unquote sequel albums. It's 20 years have gone by. Let's hear part 2. And it's like, well, you're not going to get part 2 20 years ago. 20 years later, you might get it 2 years later, if you're going to get it at all. And I think it can just be really hard to please people. So I think at the end of the day, as long as they do what they want to do, like whatever makes them happy. If the idea behind re-recording those albums was, because they just wanted them to sound better, I guess that's cool. But I don't necessarily know as a fan like how I feel about that.
Yeah, kind of in wrapping up, if you would like to keep up with everything going on with Reb, and this is going to be a long one because I'm going to give the plug for Reb, for Winger, and Whitesnake, just in case you want to keep up with any of them. You can find them on Facebook at whitesnake.official, Instagram at Whitesnake, Twitter at Whitesnake. Simple enough. If you would like to keep up with Winger on Facebook, it's just official Winger. They don't have an Instagram that I could find. It basically just looks like it's Kip Winger. And on Twitter, it is Winger the Band. And if you would like to keep up with Reb, you can keep up with him on Instagram at Reb Beach Official, and Twitter at Real Reb Beach. That's R-E-B, Reb. Not Rev, like Rev Your Engines, in case anyone didn't know that. And if you would like to keep up with Metal Nexus, you can find them on Facebook at Metal Nexus, Instagram at metal.nexus, Twitter at metal_nexus, or simply go to the website metalnexus.net and get all your concert reviews, photos, and all the going-ons there. And Dan will tell you about how to keep up with all the going-ons within his world.
Well, within my world of Facebook, you can find me under Daniel Terry. On Twitter, you can find me at DiscussMetalDan. You can send me an email if you want to at discussmetaldan@gmail.com. And you can find my other podcast, Discography Discussion, at discussmetal.com.
And if you would like to keep up with all things this podcast, you can find us simply enough at BrewSpeak on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Go check out our YouTube channel. We got some of the live videos of us doing the interviews up on there. And we also launched the Patreon, as you heard on the last episode with Mixie. Go to patreon.com/BrewSpeakPod. We have a couple episodes. We're going to do probably another one this week and get that out for next week. But we're open to your suggestions, and we thank you for all your support, monetarily or otherwise. And for the Brewtally Speaking Podcast, I am John.
And I am Dan.
We will talk to you all next time.